Welcome to the American Institute of Stress's official podcast, Finding Contentment. The goal of this podcast is to highlight new information about stress and stress management techniques. While we understand that stress is a very personalized issue and different for everyone, we hope to help you find your own way to contentment.
Hey, greetings, everyone. This is your host, Executive Director of the American Institute of Stress. It's Will Heckman. Thank you very much for joining us again today. If you're joining us for the first time, this podcast is the official podcast for the American Institute of Stress, and we deal with mostly stress and stress-related issues. I also want to remind everybody that's listening that a Combat Stress magazine has just come out, so go to stress.org, and you can see that magazine for free, as well as Contentment Magazine. And sending those reviews and comments. We love reading and hearing from you guys. And while we're talking about, and you can subscribe to both magazines. And while we're talking about subscribe, hit the like button and subscribe button. I'm going to do it every YouTuber does. I do it every show. It really makes a difference. Subscribe. It makes me feel good. Doesn't take a lot. Today, we're going to be talking about something that's very near and dear to my heart, and that is pain. And how it affects people in everyday lives. I'm sure we've all had pain. We all do. And some levels of them are a lot higher. But pain is a major cause of stress. And living with pain every day can be, well, very stressful. It can also lead to mental health problems. In fact, 1/3 of adults with arthritis have anxiety or depression issues. And stress can make chronic pain even worse. Stress can cause your muscles to tense and spasm, which increases pain. And when you feel stress, levels of the hormone cortisol rise, and this can cause inflammation and pain over a long period of time. And I've had a physical therapy coach, because I have had physical therapy, tell me that if it hurts, it's inflamed. And I guess our guest today is going to have to tell me if that's true or not, because joining us today is Rick Olderman. And Rick graduated from physical therapy school back in 1996. And after really failing to help his patients adequately, he realized that standard physical therapy education pretty much left him unprepared to help people with chronic pain and nagging injuries. And I've had both. And as a result, Rick has spent the last 20 plus years developing a pioneering approach. And shortly after, Rick took over a small physical therapy clinic in Denver back in 2012. Business grew very rapidly due to word of mouth referrals and physicians seeing his rapid and lasting results for the most difficult patients. Its body in balance physical therapy has become the clinic to recover from painful injuries. He has trained all his therapists in his revolutionary approach to fixing pain and is sought out around the world for his advice and his approach. And then find out more about it. Just go to rickolderman.com if there's more websites or places you could go. I'm sure Rick will tell you about it, but rickolderman.com. So please join me in welcoming our guest, Rick Olderman. Hi, Rick.
Hey, Will. Thank you so much for having me.
It's a real pleasure. You know, I wanted to talk about this for a while. People obviously contact the American Institute of Stress all the time about different reasons they have stress, but up there is that they're in pain, is they're going through something. But before we talk about that, I want to ask you how you got involved in physical therapy. I know some, people that find their way through physical therapy, but in different ways. A lot of times they were athletes that were hurt and they went through so much physical therapy. I think I've gone through physical therapy like 4 different times, 4 different body parts. So, I got to talk to a bunch of physical therapists, but how did you get started in it?
Well, I suffered my own back pain prior to physical therapy school. And I was volunteering at a physical therapy clinic at the time, thinking about going to PT school. And one of the therapists noticed that I was in a lot of pain. He ended up treating me a couple times and completely took my back pain away. But it came back a couple weeks later. And I didn't have the heart to tell him, and he hadn't charged me anything for it. He just did a couple little things. But so I realized, you know what, I need to go to PT school to figure out the insider secrets. And the focus in PT school was more on the tissues that become irritated rather than why the tissues are becoming irritated. And intuitively, I felt like if I don't understand these whys, I'm never going to figure things out. And so, and that bore out, as you said in your intro, you know, I wasn't very good as a PT my first few years as a PT because I didn't have those why answers. And then once I learned what those answers were, that's when I started seeing amazing results. And just these last 20 years have been digging deeper into those whys. And it turns out it's a lot simpler than most people think to solve it.
You know, when people talk to me about it and they go to physical therapists, it's basically, and I've had the same experience, it's basically the same thing. You go, you treat things with heat, you treat things with cold, you treat things with was it surgical banding, and you can try and get your range of motion back. One of the things and I want to talk to you a little bit about this, is one of the things that they never talk about is emotionally how you're dealing with it. Mm-hmm. And you know what? Especially if you're an active person and you get hurt and you go, like you said, you go to physical therapy, you feel better, and 2 weeks later comes back. It's really stressful. And just like, I bet you a lot of people have been in your situation, they don't want to say anything.
Right.
You know, you kind of, I don't know if you're embarrassed or you feel like, oh, it must be me. I must not be doing it right.
Yeah.
Did you find that? And when you went through physical therapy school, did they address that at all?
No. So, so we can go into my approach and how I connect that with emotions and stress.
Sure.
But typically I expect to see a 30 to 50% reduction in pain in my first visit, after my first visit. If I don't see that, if someone comes back and they say, well, I'm about 10, maybe 15% better, then I think that they're just trying to not hurt my feelings. So anything less than 30, I'm doubtful that they're telling me the truth and that they're just trying to be nice. Or maybe they're just really hopeful and really want to believe that they're better. But I find that 30% mark, that's a good definitive marker. When someone reaches that, I know for sure that they're telling me the truth.
And one of the things that you say is that PT school left you totally unprepared to really help people.
Yeah, I wouldn't say totally unprepared. Like I could do well with acute problems like sprains, strains, surgeries, things like that. But I really felt I was unprepared for any kind of chronic issues. That's where I feel that the education is missing. And it wasn't just me. All of the therapists I've trained at my clinic, they're in the same boat. So we're taught a million different tests and understand our anatomy and physiology backwards and forwards.
Right.
But we're not taught the whys behind all of this and how to put this all together as a system instead of this. I call it component thinking. Right. We're trained as a component, that the body is a series of components, but there's no one that's really putting that back together again as a system, which is really how we function.
Do me a favor, for our listeners, explain the difference between acute and chronic injuries.
I think the technical definition is anything over 3 months old is a chronic issue. And I would add a caveat to that even if you've solved that problem within 3 months, but it keeps coming back again and again, either once a year or twice a year or whatever, that is a chronic problem as well. Any kind of recurring injury, even though you can solve it in a week or two, but it keeps recurring.
And it's funny, the people that speak to me about or contact us about the stress of their pain and their injuries, it's chronic. It's usually, it affects their whole life. You know, and certain people in certain walks of life, certainly first responders, but people like nurses, people like teachers who have to stay on their feet all day and they have lower back problems or knee problems like I did. It affects everything. Yeah,
and no one escapes it. I don't care whether you have a sedentary job or an active job. No one escapes the possibility of chronic pain. And what the interesting thing was my first job was in a small town in southwestern Colorado, And I got to the point, Will, where, I mean, I was very stressed because I was, I couldn't help these chronic people. I was ashamed to go out in public because I was almost the only PT in town. And I hated to go to grocery stores or anything like that. I didn't want to be recognized. And so I thought, oh my God, I'm just terrible at this, And then I moved to Denver and I started working at a really nice health club downtown. And my schedule instantly filled up with people who had chronic issues. And these people had seen the best of the best here in Denver. And I'm just like, well, holy smokes, it's not just me. It's everyone. Chiropractors, massage therapists, physical therapists, doctors. No one's solving this pain. And so that's what really opened my eyes to like, oh, maybe I'm not such a failure. Maybe it's my training that's a failure,
Right.
And so that's when I started rethinking everything.
And Rick, I got to tell you that a lot of people that go through that, doctor after doctor, therapist after therapist, doing, whatever to heal themselves, and they're still in pain. Those are the guys that end up turning to drugs.
Yes.
Turning to pharmaceuticals. And, I don't have to tell you the opioid problem we have in this country because of things like that. How did you, so you discovered, you said that pain signal says something is wrong right now.
Yes.
First of all, what did you mean by that?
Well, more and more chronic pain is being written off as a disease. And so when we think of it, if you look in a lot of research or you read a lot of newspaper articles, the writers are saying this is, researchers are classifying chronic pain as a disease. Well, that kind of removes the burden of solving it from the healthcare practitioners because, oh, well, it's a disease. I can't do anything about that. And so what I just don't believe that it is a disease. I believe it's really a failure on our part as practitioners to understand what's going on. And, I've had people who come in for 20 years, 30 years of pain, and they're solved within a week or two.
Wow.
So what we're doing is solving the reason why the pain is occurring. If you solve those reasons, the pain will go away because our body has all of these mechanisms built into it. If you cut your finger, it heals in a few days. If you break a bone, it mends in 6 to 8 weeks. So we have these internal processes that will heal us, but we need to get rid of the obstacles that are in the way. And it turns out how we're using our bodies is a lot of what those obstacles are. And so when I say chronic pain is about something wrong now, if you fix it now, your pain will go away now. And it's not like it should take, if you've had 20 years of chronic pain, it shouldn't take 20 years to solve it, right? No, it just means that your other practitioners weren't looking in the right places because your body has these mechanisms in place to heal itself. We just have to get all the other obstacles out of the way.
What are some of the obstacles?
Well,
name the number one that's everybody seems to have this.
Let's just talk about back pain. That's the most common, right?
Which I'm in right now.
Yeah, exactly. So you may not want to do this right now, but your listeners can do this right now. I'm going to take you through a little test so you can see exactly what I'm talking about. All right. So all your listeners out there, lie down on the floor with your legs straight. And Will, if you want to do this too, you don't have to watch this video in order to take this test. You can just listen to my voice.
Right, because we do have people just listening.
Yeah, great. Yeah. So just lie down on the floor with your legs straight. It could be on the couch. It could be on your bed. It doesn't have to be on the floor. But I want your legs to be straight. And I want you to feel what your back feels like in this position. And stay there for about 30 seconds. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to bend your knees so your feet are flat on the floor instead of your legs being straight. And if you don't feel a difference in your back, then hug your knees to your chest if that feels better. So what you're doing is comparing how your back feels in these two positions, legs straight or with knees bent. Can you imagine, Will, which position feels better for most people?
Oh, absolutely. I've done this. I've done this multiple times. When I bring my knees up, the pain subsides substantially.
Exactly.
And
So
I can't remember the last time I've laid straight like that on the floor, like you mentioned, and it didn't hurt.
right. So you and 99% of all the other back pain sufferers out there have this same pattern of problem. All right. And I call it an extension problem. But really, all it is that if you straighten out your legs again, you will feel that your back arches slightly more off the floor when your legs are straight. Then when your knees are bent, your back is flattening towards the floor. And that change in shape is one of the things that makes your back feel a lot better. But it's not necessarily just the change in the shape of your spine. In fact, it may have nothing to do with the change of the shape of your spine. What you're doing is when your legs are straight, you have forces that are trying to pull your back into an arch. That's why your back is arching. And when you bend your knees, those forces are now eliminated, and your back assumes more of a natural curve, the one that it wants to be in. So if you think about this as removing forces that are causing our back to arch more, then that's really what I'm talking about in terms of how this works in the body. So what are these forces? Well, now that you know that your back feels better with your knees bent, let's have everyone stand up, and I'll see how this plays out in the real world. So stand up and listen to this podcast. And I want you to notice that while you're listening, if you stand there for longer than a minute, you're going to notice that your knees tend to lock backwards and straight. All right. So notice whether that's happening in you right now. And now what I'd like you to do is unlock your knees so they are slightly bent. Feel what just happened to your back. And if you're not sure, lock your knees again. And you'll feel that when your knees are locking, your back is arching more. When your knees are unlocking, your back is arching less. So what you've just discovered is your back feels better when you remove the forces that are trying to pull your back into an arch, right? Your back feels better when it's flatter. And you also just found out that when you stand normally for anything usually longer than a minute, you tend to lock your knees, which causes your back to arch. So if you just start unlocking your knees, I mean, I've solved a lot of back pain just by telling people to stop locking their knees. And so this, and this also happens when you're walking too. A lot of people are locking their knees when walking. So if you take 10,000 steps a day, and each one of those steps is causing your back to arch excessively, then it's no wonder that you've got a big hammer hitting your back all the time. You need to learn to walk with your knees softer rather than with them locked out. This alone will solve a significant portion of most people's back pain. So that's what I mean when I say a lot of the things that we're doing is promoting our own pain, but we just don't know it because locking the knees is a natural habit, right? Our brain doesn't know that that's causing our pain. Our body does, but our brain hasn't gotten that signal. So a lot of training to get out of chronic pain is introducing your brain to the things that are causing their pain and the things that will solve your pain.
So your approach is a lot more holistic. I mean, when I say that, I mean, you're looking at the entire body, even though it's a back injury. You know, you're talking about not locking out your knees. Are backs number one on the list? Mm-hmm. I would guess that, but you know,
absolutely.
I've had so many injuries: shoulders, knees, toes, fingers, but back is the one that keeps coming back.
Okay, so let's talk about that for just a second, Will. Is that though I have two evaluations I do for people depending on where their pain is in their body. It's back and lower body exam is one body zone. So I measure everything from the rib cage down to the foot. If you have any problem from your foot to your back, and if you have any upper body pain, neck, headaches, shoulder, whatever, I measure from your pelvis to the top of your head. And we look at everything from in that system. The upper body system, while connected to the lower body system, largely operates independently of the lower body system. And the lower body system largely operates independently of the upper body system. There are connections that can be meaningful. But anyway, so when you say that you have multiple problems, oh, I've got my back and my toe, you're thinking of those things as separate problems. Mm-hmm. They're not separate problems. They're all one system problem. And that's why you're having these chronic issues. Same with the upper body issues.
And it's funny, when I've gone to PTs in the past, and I haven't lately, I mean, I'm too old to really test my body. Although every
Right.
once in a while I do, and I'm sorry that I do. I promise the next day. But in the past, when I've had injuries that caused me, or a significant amount of pain that caused me to go to a physical therapist, they treated that one spot.
Correct.
And I mean, literally that one spot. And I've been asked multiple times, okay, and I understand this because I've asked people to do the same. Okay, take one finger and put it right on the spot that hurts. I mean, I understand that that's a way to diagnose of what's going on, but that's your method sounds more sane.
Well,
The whole body.
it's logical.
Yes.
And it's, as one of my therapists described it, it's simpler but more comprehensive. So once you understand how everything is put together, it's very simple to understand what the problems are that you need to solve. And so, a lot of this is, the gold standard in physical therapy and medicine in general is that we base all of our treatment on evidence. Well, research, almost by definition, what you need to do is you need to isolate one component in your research project and test it, with or without that component to see what happened to something, right? Pain or function or something like that. But that's not how our bodies work. All right. Our bodies work as systems that interreact with each other, not as components. So it's like going to a car repairman and saying, who only solves carburetor problems. Well, how does that fit with the rest of the engine and how the car moves? Well, I'm sorry, I don't deal with that. You've got a carburetor problem. That is ludicrous.
Right.
It's the same thing that we're doing in medicine is we're so evidence heavy that we're missing the forest through the trees. And that's the way it's gone. So just by virtue of being an evidence-based discipline, we're going, I feel, in the wrong direction of where we need to be going to solve. And this is why we have so much chronic pain in the world, I believe.
And you know what? In the stress world, in the world that researches stress and looks at stress, it's very similar. You need to look at the entire picture. And I want to talk to you a little bit about, because this is a show about stress, and you're in a particular kind of field where people come to you for pain, which in itself causes stress, but the incident that causes the pain, it could be a car wreck, it could be a repeating motion at work, something like that. So they're coming to you not only in pain, but so stressed out about their pain. Do you ever address that?
Oh, of course. Yeah. So this is the beauty of this approach, is that when we see things as a system, and so I have a little skeleton here that I explain things to my patients with, right? So they can see what I'm talking about. And when they get that, they see, that invariably the comment that I get is, no one has ever explained this to me like this before, or no one's ever looked at me this much of me before. And so they have been living with chronic pain. So one of the reasons is why. So we just went over back pain, which is the most common thing, and that there is an excessive arching or too many forces trying to pull the back into an arch. Well, there are lots of things in the lower body system that are contributing to that excessive arching. Okay. So we also have, and now that we're talking about stress, we're going to get into another layer of problems. And this is why it took me so long to figure all this out, is that we have something in our body called fascia. Like the fascia on our feet is plantar fascia. Everyone's pretty much heard of that. The IT band is fascia, and fascia has contractile properties. And it turns out that there's a researcher, Thomas Myers, who found out that we have fascial highways that connect from the bottoms of our feet to the tops of our heads. We have a fascial highway that goes along the back. We have a fascial highway that goes through the front, through the side, and diagonally through the body. So what this means is that anywhere you tug on that fascial system, it affects something up and down the chain. Okay. So you also mentioned earlier that tension and stress is a big deal. So we also have a neural component to the tension in our bodies, which is one derived from our brain. So stress, emotional trauma, things like that increase our neural tension because our brain is what is controlling our whole body. The interesting thing is, Will, is that when our brain is increasing our neural tension, our muscular tension, it's happening in the patterns of dysfunction that we have created through our movement. So if you have a back that's too arched, what happens is when you become stressed, the muscles that arch your back become more taut and more arched. It deepens the pattern that you're stuck in. And there are many different types of patterns. So this is how stress, and so we can get into all geek out on that, but I don't think you want to do that. But anyway, this is the connection between stress and physical pain, is that stress is triggering the patterns of dysfunction that you set up in your life that have caused your pain in the first place.
Now, some of these incidences are people have not set them up. They're accidental. Things happen, injuries happen in all kinds of ways. You could slip on the ice, but the continued stressing over what is going on and not addressing it exacerbates the injury itself.
Yeah, and you're right. There are a few injuries that aren't set up prior to that stress being able to trigger that pattern. But I will tell you, because you are not moving, because you do not have pain, and then you have an accident and now have chronic pain, that does not mean that your body was perfect before you had that accident. We have many redundant systems of movement in our body. So like I've had people with full rotator cuff tears whose arms function just fine with no rotator cuff. So our bodies have these redundant systems so that we can get from A to B, even if there is a big problem, and we can still function fine. So because you don't have pain prior to an accident doesn't mean that you were perfect. And this is why a lot of attorneys don't like to put me on a stand in a courtroom for a motor vehicle accident, because I can find probably 10 different problems with that person's body that happened that were pre-existing before that motor vehicle accident that have led to their. So if the pain becomes chronic after an accident, then the existence of those prior problems is probably more likely. But if you have just acute pain after an accident and it resolves and you can go on with your life, that likely means that you didn't have chronic issues leading up to that recovery. Okay. Does that make sense?
Yes. It absolutely does. And I'm wondering, I don't know, because it's, like I said, but my experiences with PTs is very standard. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? I don't know what you can do to address people's stress who come to you, and it's got to make healing a lot harder. It's got to make your job a lot harder. I'm in pain. I don't want to. If they can do it without, I would never tell people never to take medication. But if they can do without the medication, they come to you like, "Hey, taking that, I don't know what to do," and they're stressed out, and because of that, it's a problem for you to help them heal.
Well, this is why I love what I do, because what I do is so different than most other practitioners. I get all those patients coming in, they're doubtful, they're skeptical, they've been around the block, they're in a lot of pain, they're stressed out. What we have to do as practitioners is fix the pain. If we can show them that we can fix the pain, stress levels go way down, trust goes way up, and people start breathing more deeply because of it, right? But when you go to the same, every physical therapist is telling you the same thing, or chiropractor or massage therapist, and none of it's working, well, no wonder you're under stress, right? Because it's not working. But that doesn't mean that you're broken, though. It just means that you're not getting the right information. So that's the thing that I notice most with the patients that come into my clinic, is that when I get that 30 to 50% reduction in pain in the first visit, maybe two, that I see their stress levels go down. I see the realization in their eyes that they can solve this. This is solvable. And boy, it all just melts away because the stress is because of failure.
Right.
Almost as much, if not more, than because of pain.
And that's why I wanted to talk to you, Rick.
Yeah.
Because there's so many people out there who, just like you said, have been through the mill, been on that merry-go-round, from PT to chiropractor to their physician to surgeons. I've been on that,
yes.
That merry-go-round you can't get off. And it's important for our listeners to hear from a guy like you who's passionate about what they do and so successful at what he does, that there is hope.
Oh, yes.
I've met people who literally quit their profession. A nurse, she quit the profession because of back pain. Just moving patients was excruciating, and she stressed every day about going to work. People think, well, we stress about work because we got to, work overload, burnout, whatever. But sometimes it's not what you think.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's people are injured and they just can't do their job anymore. And listening to you, I think a lot of people get hope.
I want to give them hope because there should be hope.
Yeah.
And the way it works with chronic pain. So let's go back to our back pain example. Let's say that you've had this arching problem in your back and you've had it for decades. Well, there's a law in the body it's called Wolff's law, that tissues respond to the stresses acting on it. So if you have excessive compression acting on your spine because of this arching problem, and you've had that for decades, well, I'm sorry, tissues are going to adapt to that. Arthritic changes will occur, discs will degenerate, maybe tear or bulge or things like that. But so your solution, if that's been going on a long time and you have a lot of structural changes that have occurred in your body because of those, my approach isn't going to solve those structural changes. They will solve the forces acting on the structural changes, which are what is making those structural changes painful. So there's tons of studies showing that people with disc herniations, disc bulges, and so forth have no pain at all. What's the difference between your back and theirs then? It's how they're using their bodies. That is removing the forces from those structural changes, and therefore will reduce or eliminate your pain.
That you know what? That's really true, because I have a bulging disc in my neck and it doesn't hurt. 99.9% of the time, I'm fine. If I do one particular thing, I ride a motorcycle, and if I ride for long periods of time, you can feel it. It radiates down into your shoulders. So that's true. And you were right on, Rick, when you say, you have to change certain things. I changed the position of the handlebars and I'm okay.
Exactly. Now, why would this handlebar position change your neck pain? Do you have any idea?
Well, it probably had to do with where my shoulders were for extended periods of time.
Exactly. So how many of your practitioners have treated your shoulders to solve your neck pain?
None.
Exactly.
None.
This is the missing secret for people with chronic headaches and neck pain, is that it's coming from their shoulder girdle system. And I can explain that if you want to go into that, but you have struck on the exact right solution by changing your shoulder position to change your neck pain.
And again, how stress plays into this. Now imagine the one thing I love doing, I enjoy doing so much, and it's causing me pain. And it makes me want to do it less. That's why it's so important for people to find, that's why we need to find a person like you who can look at it and say, okay, let's really look at all of you. Not that one-fingered spot that we talked about. I mean, there's such a relationship between pain and stress, and that there's a lot of aspects to it that people don't think about. It keeps you from being happy and content. And they need to understand that, okay, just because they've tried before doesn't mean they should give up. They need to see a guy like you. Did they have to travel to Denver?
Well, no, actually. So two things. One is I sold my clinic a few months ago because let's just say insurance companies couldn't help me pay the bills.
Mm-hmm.
So, so I've sold that, but I've shifted my focus to making the world more of my clinic. So I've created downloadable home programs to help people solve their pain. One of the things that the clinic taught me these last 10 years was that all of these dysfunctional things that are happening in people are happening in patterns of dysfunction. So that same pattern in you might cause you back pain, but it may cause someone else sciatic pain, or it may cause someone else SI joint pain, or hip pain, or knee pain. So what the interesting thing is I learned in my clinic was that the manifestation of the same pattern is different in everyone based on their exercise history, their genetics, sports they've played, their jobs, all sorts of things cause the same pattern to be manifest differently in different people. But the beauty of this is that because it's the same pattern of issues, it's very simple to solve. So I can create a back pain program that will solve almost everything for back pain and sciatic pain all in the same program. How can I do that? Because most practitioners will say, oh, you've got sciatic pain versus, oh, you've got back pain. No, it's all the same thing. SI joint pain, it's all the same, under the same umbrella of lower body dysfunction. So
and you wrote a series of books on it, didn't you?
Yes. So
I was looking at them. How did you? They were really good. They were easy to read, and they have great information. I think it's called the Fixing Method.
Yeah, Fixing You Method. And so I wrote those books about 10 or 12 years ago. And that was, I had taken my mentors in this field was Dr. Shirley Sarman out of Washington University in St. Louis. And she's written a couple textbooks, and I took a lot of her seminars. Well, I made friends with a PT who was also going through all of her seminars too. And after about a year of going through these seminars, I met up with him and I said, hey, how's this going for you? He says, I might use some of it for a home exercise program or something. I said, well, what are you talking about? This is solving a lot of chronic pain. And he says, yeah, but I'm a manual therapist, so this doesn't really, jive with me. And a manual therapist is someone who you will manipulate or do soft tissue work or otherwise, uses their hands to get in there and change something about how your body's functioning. And when he said that to me, I realized, oh my gosh, this information is being filtered through practitioners with belief systems. Mm. His belief system is that everyone should be solved by manual therapy. This can't possibly solve it because I need to use my hands to solve pain. And thankfully, I had been so unsuccessful as a PT up to that point where I wasn't ascribing to any particular point of view other than pain has to be something with how we're using our bodies. And this answered a lot of those questions. So anyway, after I realized that a lot of people weren't getting this information because of their practitioners' belief systems, filtering it all out, that's when I wrote my books, because I decided just to do an end around practitioners and take it directly to the people. And so those were really helpful for a lot of people over these last 10 years. But what I've learned in my clinic is even more comprehensive and faster than what's in those books. Because if you look at the back pain book, I've probably got maybe 80 different exercises in there, because I wanted to try and solve everyone's back pain, no matter what possibility there could be. But when I learned from my clinic that, 80% of those people or 90% of those people all are having the same patterns of issues, that's when I decided I need to make this simpler for everyone and more comprehensive.
And where do they find out that information?
Well, like you said at the beginning, if you go to rickolderman.com, you'll see a tab with all my products there, and you'll see the back pain program and all that kind of stuff. I also have a direct website link if you want to go to fixingyou.com. That has all of my programs there. And if you type in Fixing You, all one word, FIXINGYOU, you'll get a 20% discount on whatever you purchase.
Can't beat that.
Yeah. So I also created, because my big thing, Will, is that I don't think that we need to have chronic pain in the world. I think if everyone understood this who works with people, if they understand, from coaches to doctors, everyone in between, if everyone knew this, we wouldn't really have this much chronic pain that we have. Because people go to a coach or a personal trainer or yoga instructor or Pilates instructor before they'll come to me, or before they'll go to a doctor. So, and those people are all about changing how we move and teaching us, right? So if they knew this information, this would just nip it all in the bud right off the bat. So I've created a training program to teach anyone how to solve pain using this method. If they go to healpatientsfaster.com, you'll see the program there. And that Fixing You code will also get you 20% off of that. And it's also, you'll find it in the rickolderman.com website too.
You know what? Everyone who's listening right now, I understand what you've been through. Rick does too. He's been there. He understands. That's why he wrote all this stuff. But if you go to a chiropractor, so it was the same thing with chiropractors for a long time, many, many years ago. They had mixers and straights, and that was it. One guy believed straight spine cured everything. One guy didn't. But if you go to, if you're hurt and in chronic pain, you go to your physician, he's going to give you drugs. They gave me drugs. They gave me muscle relaxants, painkillers, whatever. But that's not necessarily the answer. I think what you are doing is a lot closer to fixing a lot of what chronic pain problems that are so common. I can't begin to tell you, especially guys my age, been through the mill. We have injuries. We have chronic pain. We've been doing repetitive motion for so long. Things like that. And we tend to think, well, it's just the way it is. It doesn't have to be. Go to Rick's sites, look at what he's got, and make a difference. Make yourself feel better. I mean, you can do it. Like I said before, don't just give up and because some doctor couldn't do it. Here's a guy who can help you. Okay, so we could talk about pain for a long time because it's common and it's so connected to stress both ways. It causes stress, and stress causes pain and inflammation. I mean, there's no way of getting one without the other. I don't believe so. But I wanted to ask you lastly, if there was a good takeaway of people who are in pain and they're experiencing stress, what is the one last thing you would tell them?
Well, the one last thing I'd say is you're not broken. It's easy to believe that you're broken because no one else has been able to solve your pain. But I've seen those patients all the time and we solve their pain. So you're not broken. You just haven't had the right information yet. And if you realize that your practitioners have been looking at you from a component standpoint, as opposed to a systems standpoint, then you're going to understand why you haven't gotten the right information.
And that's probably what's caused you the most stress in your life. And not only being in pain, but finding one person after the other who thinks you hasn't fixed you because you think you're broken. It's really good to have this conversation with you, Rick. I mean, I wish we could talk more about it. Maybe we can hit you up to write an article for Contentment Magazine or for Combat Stress Magazine. I'm sure the editors of those magazines would be open to that. And I'm sure people would love to hear more about this because, like you say, so many people feel they're broken. We're running out of time. Rick, I want to thank you for joining us today and giving us all this information. I'm going to obviously put your websites on the bottom so people can go to all of them. If you gave great advice, great insights to what's going on with us. If you're listening or watching, please remember to visit rickolderman.com and the other websites. Also, his books are on Amazon, just like everything else on the planet. And so just go to Amazon and put in Rick's name and you'll find his books. I did, and I tell you what, I thought they were really helpful. So I want to thank you for that. All right.
My pleasure. Thank you.
That's going to be it for today. Remember, everyone, your support helps keep making these podcasts possible. So go to stress.org, subscribe to our magazines. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, hit a like button. And I want to remind everyone, just as stress is different for each of us, there's no one stress reduction or management strategy that is right for everyone. So that means you need to join us next time as we explore more stress management and strategies and insights. And remember that, like I said, go to stress.org, gather some information, tools, and techniques to help you live a healthier, happier, hopefully a longer life. And I hope the information that you heard from Rick and myself today will help you find contentment. So good day, everyone.